Hey everybody, my name is Sam. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be celebrating half Halloween-a-thon by reviewing a book in costume. I'm wearing my pearls and my shirt dress and about half a gallon of fake blood, which is 100% edible but 300% disgusting. I don't recommend eating it. Not that I really tried to, but I licked my lip and it wasn't good. It wasn't good. Don't like it. It's like fruit punch and chocolate and corn syrup. It's like really fucking gross. Anyway, today, while wearing my fancy housewife with an attitude outfit here, I'm going to be talking to you guys about Lady Killer by Joelle Jones. For Half Halloween-a-thon, I read volume 2 of this series as my book about murder, but nobody wants to hear you talk about just the second book in any series, and honestly, it doesn't make much sense if you try to review it, so, excuse me. I'm going to talk about the series as a whole and just kind of how I think it's grown over time, because when I first read volume 1 of this, I had really high hopes for it, but I really, by the end of it, wasn't sure how I felt, because the idea, the premise had such, awesome potential, and I just, by the end of the first volume, I just, didn't really feel like they were realizing that potential. So this is volume 1, which is, just called Lady Killer Volume 1. They don't have, clever names, or subtitles at all, but, this is by Joelle Jones and Jamie S. Rich. They co-wrote it, and, this had some of the issues that I tend to find to be true with first issues of comic and graphic novel series in general, and that's just that in a 120-page span, it's really, really hard to build an entire premise and an entire world and a bunch of characters and still tell a compelling story, give it some kind of plot. And so by the end of the first volume, I was just not really sure what had even just happened. But I'm a firm believer in at least giving comics or graphic novels until volume 2 to kind of show me what they got. And I'm so glad I did, because volume 2 was so good. By the time I got to volume 2, the characters were much better developed. They had a little bit more kind of backstory and kind of just there was more behind them. The plot itself was told in a much more smooth fashion, and I think that might have partly been a result of the second volume not being co-written. The first volume was co-written by Joelle Jones and Jamie S. Rich, and volume 2 was just written by Joelle Jones. She also did all of the illustrating for both volumes, so that's kind of cool. I could use that for the Read Harder that I didn't realize I could. I can use it for my comic written and illustrated by the same person. But you can even tell just the color scheme on this one is much harsher. It's much more we mean fucking business, and boy did they. So the premise of this series is that Josie Schuller is a typical 1960s housewife by day and a killer for hire by night, and sometimes by day. And she's very good at her job. Volume 1, she decides to quit the business initially because she gets an assignment that she just can't get behind, and then shit goes awry. It's not the kind of business you can just, leave. And then we get kind of left in the middle of things happening in there, not in the middle of the action, but it's like a cliffhanger. You don't really know what's going to happen because there are still people after her after she tries to quit the business, but for now the danger has passed, that kind of thing. Volume 2 picks up sometime later, and she and her family have since moved across the country, and she has gone into business for herself because apparently she decided she didn't really want to leave the business. She just wanted to leave the corporation she was working for, I guess. And she's kind of doing her thing, and in a truly ironic fashion, she does not mind the killing, but she does not enjoy the cleanup. And since she's a housewife and cleaning is a large part of what she does, I found that to be kind of just poetic. She's just like, man, I don't want to dispose of these bodies. This is too much cleaning. I'm not into it. But she is, in this one, spends a lot more time focusing on her like work-life balance, kind of trying to keep her second life hidden from her husband and her 2 daughters. And that becomes very tricky when someone from her past shows up, who also happens to be somebody from her mother-in-law's past, which I did not see coming, and I really think it was a good addition to the story. It really gave the mother-in-law more of a character, who was previously just kind of a cranky mother-in-law. And it just really kind of threw in that, like, holy fuck factor that you get sometimes, you know, with a good twist. In Volume 2, I think that the female characters in general became much, much more well-developed. Volume 1, none of the characters really had a whole lot behind them just because there wasn't time. Volume 2, a lot of the male characters are still kind of flat, but I think that was sort of intentional, at least in the instance of Josie's husband, who is just a standard man of the house, 1960s, go to work, hate my job, come home, get mad if I have to eat leftovers kind of guy. He's not like violent mad, he's just, I don't like doing this, wah wah, kind of dude. Which I guess, given the dynamic of, or what the dynamic of their household is supposed to be, makes sense, but if I were him, I wouldn't want to fuck with a woman like Josie. Granted, he has no idea what she does, so, you know. But, he's kind of like I said, he's kind of flat. I think it was intentional, just to be like, this is her mundane, everyday life. He does nothing to advance the plot. We don't need to know much more about him than all of that. There is one male character who plays a pivotal role in Volume 2 of this. We don't know much about his motivations. We never learn much about them, but we do, he does like play an important role in kind of progressing the plot forward and sort of turning everything on its head. And I do think that the character did an effective job of that, even without a whole lot of like knowing kind of what his deal is. Like, you learn about his past, you learn about his present, but you don't really learn about him, if that makes sense. Also in this, you learn a lot more about Josie's past, which is nice. You kind of learn how she became who she is, which is something I was wondering in the first book. Like, how does a woman of the time get into the murder business, lucrative as it may be? And in this, you kind of get a glimpse of that. Although I read that that was a last minute addition, I'm really glad that they threw it in there because it really adds an extra dimension to the characters and the story as a whole. I think it wouldn't have been the same without that little like kind of flashback in there. Overall, also, I really, really enjoy the art in these books, like in this series. It's definitely reminiscent of like 1950s and 60s like magazine advertisements, as well as kind of just vintage comics. There's a lot of like strong line work and really bold colors, and I don't know, it's just very well done. I think Joelle Jones really, really shines in that, although I do also enjoy the writing. I don't know. It's a good one. There's not a whole lot to say, I guess, without spoiling the entire book series, because it is a comic and each volume is just over 100 pages. And a couple people, when I talked about this in my TBR, had expressed interest in reading it, so I don't want to spoil too much. So I guess I'm just going to quit while I'm ahead. But I will say, Volume 1, I think I gave 3 stars when I read it, because I was just like, it's all right, it has potential, let's give it time. Volume 2, I gave 4 stars. I have really high hopes for how the series is going to continue. I will definitely keep buying them as they're coming out. And I definitely recommend you read it, especially if you enjoy, you know, I guess like murder mystery kind of stuff, even though this isn't really a mystery, or if you enjoy dark comedy, if you enjoy vintage art styles, if you enjoy kind of femme fatale noir type of things. I don't know. This fits a lot of kind of different categories, but really just if you like the idea of strong women being strong women, kicking ass, and not being superheroes, give this a shot. It's really good. You'll probably like it. And happy half Halloween. Bye.